Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. All right, we're going to stand by as we try to log on to our teleconference number. And I'm get those folks on the phone line hooked up.
Welcome to the conferencing center.
All right, so give me a minute.
At any time during this message, please enter your passcode followed by the pound sign.
704. All right, so bear with me as I try to get the phone line together with the folks that
Your
call on the
passcode has been
teleconference.
confirmed. If you need technical assistance during your call, press *0. There are 6 parties in conference, including yourself.
All right, looks like we're having some issues with the phone line this morning, so I'll keep trying as we move along with the study. Let me turn that down. All right, again, hello everyone. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Let me turn up my volume. If you have particular questions, I'm assuming this is my first time, so if you want to reach out and ask questions, please feel free to do so. So again, bear with me a couple minutes. I'm trying to get those on the phone line hooked up. Because, of course, Murphy's Law, something always goes wrong when you want it to. So let me try 704-3991. All right, so the purpose of today's session is to go over the CDFM Module 1 as we review. We've completed all the material, and now we're trying to go through the review process. No luck. All right, so understand when you're studying for the CDFM is you cannot just memorize the information on the page. You have to study in the essence of trying to understand the information. You got to understand the process. You got to understand the key players involved in the process, and you got to understand the document, what is going on. So as I always teach is to strive to picture, if you put all of this in a puzzle and you break the puzzle apart, the exam is testing your ability to put those pieces back together. All right, so I'm going to have to, let me see. I have a few people trying to call me, so bear with me. All right, let me do this. Right, so you got to make sure that you understand the information. So with the CDFM Module 1, 2, and 3, all the information overlaps. So you're not just going to be able to study Module 1 and think that's all the information that's going to be on the exam. Also, if you've never taken any of the exam, I want to make sure you understand that the information on the exam is not, I wouldn't say directly, it's not direct. So you have to be able to know what portion of the information they're asking about. So the breakdown of the exam is fiscal law is 30.4%. Manpower management is 12%. Enterprise risk management and internal control is 20.3%. And fiscal law accounts for 37.1% of the Module 1 exam. So the purpose of you understanding that is so that as you're studying, you can understand that the majority of the questions comes from those particular areas. However, on the exam, it does not break the information up for you. It does not say, okay, you're in competency area 1, competency area 3, 2, or fiscal law. By understanding the information when you read through the questions, then you will be able to answer the question. All right, so I have to call back all right, I'm going to pause here again. Bear with me because this is my first live, and then now the phone line's having issues. 86. So I'm going to try to, there's some people that's on the phone line that's trying to call in. Yes, sir. This is Helen Thomas in reference to the CDFM study group, phone line 9924. The music is still playing, and I signed off and signed back on. Yes, sir. Okay.
Welcome to the conferencing center. At any time during this message, please enter.
All right, so don't hang up on those that are on the live video. Please stand by. We're trying to get the phone line up. Okay, you're the third person who said that. So can you stay on the line and make sure with you? Yes, please. Thank you.
Your passcode has been confirmed. If you need technical
All right, so don't hang up. Y'all don't hang up.
star 0.
I'm doing live today, so now the phone line is acted up. And I have a few people on the teleconference. All right. Okay, so is there anyone that's on the Facebook Live who would like to, any question that you have of me as far as what the study group is about?
It should be active now. Oh, wait, while you test it.
All right, let me call back in
Okay.
because I still hear the music. We're having a rough day today.
Welcome to the conferencing center. At any time during this message,
Okay.
your passcode has been confirmed.
All right.
If you need
Let's
technical assistance during your call, press star 0. There are 6 parties in conference, including
Okay.
yourself.
Okay, so you're good.
All right, I'm good. Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about the delay. We had some issues with the phone line. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you, ma'am.
But we still hear that music, don't you? Y'all can hear me, but you can still hear the music? Oh, my goodness. All right, stand by. Okay. We're having a rough morning. All right, y'all don't hang up. Let me see. All right, let's see. I don't want to continue because I'm also recording live, but I don't want to continue because I don't want y'all to miss anything. Hey, hello? Yeah, we still got the music. I can hear the people, but they can also hear. Somebody has the hold button on? Okay, hold on. All right, you hold on, please. All right, if anybody on the phone line and you have the hold button on, that is the reason we're still hearing the music. So please take it off hold, or I'm going to have to disconnect everybody and we call back in. Are you able to disconnect everybody? And then they put the call on hold. And I can hear people still calling. Okay, okay, I'm going to see if they can hear me to hang up and then call back in. Somebody's got it on hold. Alrighty, thank you. Hello, can y'all hear me over the music?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, somebody has their phone on hold, and by putting it on hold, that's why we're hearing the music. So I need everyone to please hang up and call back in. Everyone, please hang up and call back in. See if we can get it off hold. Okay, go ahead and hang up, please. Murphy's Law. I will not be discouraged. We gonna do this
Welcome
today.
to the conferencing center. At any time during this message,
No.
please enter your
All right,
passcode.
'cause
followed
I
by
want to
the
make
pound
sure
sign.
that the study session is beneficial, so I don't want to continue like this. Okay, let's see. Hopefully. So if you're on the phone line, please do not put your phone on hold.
Your passcode has been confirmed.
And I'm
If you
keeping
need
my
technical
fingers crossed.
assistance during your call,
If not, we're
press
going to go ahead.
*0. There are 4 parties in conference, including yourself.
Yeah, somebody's got the phone on hold, so we can't hear. Okay, if you're on the phone line and you have Facebook, I'm doing it on Facebook Live, so that's the way I'm going to have to go because I don't want to sit here and keep frustrating myself with this phone line. Again, if you're on Facebook and you're on the Facebook group for the CDFM, please go ahead and log on to Facebook Live because somebody's got the phone on hold and it's throwing that music in the background, so I can't hear anything. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hang up off the phone line. Sorry about that, everyone. All right, we're going to go ahead and drive on. For those that are on Facebook Live, we're going to go ahead and do review. All right, so as I was recapping, is when you're studying for the CDFM exams, you have to study in the goal of understanding the information. You cannot just go through the page and just memorize what is there, because when you see it on the exam, it's going to be in a scenario base, and you're only going to be successful if you understand what it is that you have to do. What are they talking about? Who are they talking about? Where in the process is it being discussed? What is being discussed? So as you're going through the material, keep that in mind. Another disclaimer I want to put out, and it's also listed in your study guides in the beginning. It says, just because you study the study guide or you have the study guide, it is not the only source that you're supposed to use. Can you pass the exam with just the CDFM study guides? Yes. But you have to make sure that you understand the information no matter how the questions are being asked. The questions on the exam will not be broken down into various competency areas. It'll just be a series of questions. I think it's 80 questions, 2 hours, and it can come from any one of those. So the knowledge that's on by knowing how many questions, the percentage of questions that comes from the different section is to know which area to focus on. So such as understanding that the Declaration of Independence came before the Constitution. Maybe you don't have to sit there and memorize the year that it happened, but you should at least know which one occurred first and which one. So as I mentioned when we studied Module 1, is making sure that you understand in the beginning. It's like telling a story. You start with the 3 branches of government based on the Constitution. You learn the legislative branch or Congress, the executive branch or the president, and your judicial branch, which is the courts. The legislators make the laws, the executive branch or the president executes the laws, and your judicial branch interprets the laws. Why is that important? If you see something that says Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution says A, B, and C, automatically when you see Article 1, you will know that they're talking about Congress. Because if you learn legislative, executive, judicial, they are directly aligned with Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 of the Constitution. Okay, so is there sound on this live? Are you all able to talk to me? So I kind of like, that's why I like the phone line, because I'm able to hear you if you have questions. I'm not sure how this live thing works, but we'll figure it out as we go along. So I'll do a little bit more research to see how you can ask questions and interact, because I like that interaction with the people. All right. So we say that Article 1 of the Constitution governs what the legislative branch is allowed to do. So how you may see it on an exam is they may give you a list of tasks: raise taxes, borrow money, declare war. Article 1 of the Constitution gives the power to the Congress, the President, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and you may have to pick the right answer. Your CDFM exam is a multiple choice exam. And so you, based on what is asked in the question, then you will have to select the right response. So automatically when you see Article 1, ding, 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 we're talking about Congress, the legislative branch. So those are the kind of things that you look for. And when you review the information on the Article 1, it says, okay, House of Representatives, they serve 2-year terms. Senators serve 6-year terms. It also talks about in Section 7 that when the president gets the bill, he has 10 days to review the bill. And also it talks about Section 9, Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. As a financial manager, every financial manager needs to know what Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 talks about. That is the reason the government shut down if we do not have an appropriation law. Because the law says that no money shall be drawn out of the Treasury unless we have an appropriation law in place. Article 2 of the Constitution governs the executive branch. So anytime if you're on a test and you see a question starts off with Article 2, automatically your brain should switch to the executive branch or the president, that we're talking about the executive branch. The president serves 4-year term. The president's in the State of the Union address, the president gives his priority for the upcoming year. He lets them know. And when we talked about bill, we also discussed that. And then Article 3 is the Supreme Court and the inferior courts. They interpret the law. In Module 1, we also discussed the legislative process. We talked about bills, joint resolution. We talked about concurrent resolution when things happen in both the House and the Senate. And we talk about simple resolution. Understanding that the bills and the joint resolution needs to go to the president for those to become effective, for those to become law. So as you're studying and you're reviewing, you should get to the point where I'm just reading the topic, looking at it, and then you should be able to articulate what do you know about that topic. At this point, if you've already gone through the study guide, the first time you should just be reading it like a book. I don't really understand it, but let me just read it. The second time you go through, you should be reading it and making notes off to the side. I like the hard copy book. This is what I have in front of me, if you can see the binder, because I like to write notes. And then the third time you go through the study guide is you're focusing on the notes that you wrote, that you said was important enough on that page to understand. And so that's at least 3 times you heard that you go through the material. It's repetition. These are not things that we all deal with on a regular basis. So it is important for us to repeat it, to understand it, to talk about it. And so even in the legislative process, as you talk about it, is understanding that the bill and the joint resolution goes to the president for the president to sign, for those to be effective. And where do we originate these legislative processes, these bills, these joint resolution? They come from the president, a member of Congress, or a committee in Congress. Those are the 3 areas. And all I'm doing is just reading the story. All right, so how does a bill become a law? Well, it starts off as a bill, which is a general legislative proposal. It goes to a committee in Congress. Don't forget, Congress is broken down into the House of Representatives and the Senate. Everything that happens on one side typically happens on the other. So that bill goes to a committee. It's referred by one of those three entities, president, member, or committee, and then it must be considered on the committee. Whichever committee is responsible for that topic, for that item, they will review your request. They may ask for justification. They may ask you to come in and have public hearings where you have to explain why we need to make this purchase. So consideration. Then the committee makes a decision. They're going to mark up, right? So just like when you write an evaluation or you write an award, chances are it's never perfect the first time. It goes up to the next level and they mark it up. Hopefully you don't have a boss like I used to have one in the past where he used a red pen, and when it comes, the paper comes back, it looked like it's just dripping with that red ink on it. So markup, and the committee then takes action. So they mark it up, they send it back to you, you fix it, and then you send up a clean bill back to that committee for submission to hire. The House and Senate, they review that request, that bill, on their floor. The House reviews it, the Senate reviews it. Then they make their decision on each side. Then at some point, they have to compare what their responses are. If there's a difference between what the House and the Senate agrees on, then they have to come together to resolve the differences. When the House and Senate comes together to resolve the differences, it's called a conference committee or the third chamber. So reading the story. So once it passes one side, it's called the engrossed bill. It's got to be reviewed on the other side. They come together. So do not get confused if, like say, the House sends 2 members to this conference committee. The Senate sends 5 members. Who has the advantage? Neither has an advantage because they're speaking as one entity. One speaker for the House, one speaker for the Senate. When they come together, they're speaking as one for that group. So it doesn't matter how many members is sitting on the group. Their job is to resolve the differences so that one bill, one document gets sent forward to the president for the president to sign. So what does it call when the House and the Senate comes together to resolve differences? It's called a conference committee or the third chamber. Once they resolve the differences, they go back to their individual floors and they make the update, the correction. Then they will publish and enroll the bill. They'll send it forward for the president to sign in one form. Only one document goes to the president for signature. And then the story continues. What does the president do? What are the options that the president has once that bill comes before him or her? Someday we will have a her. Well, he can either approve or veto, but there are certain conditions that must be met. So, 1, he can approve and sign it. He loves what he sees, so he approves it and he signs it. 2nd, he can veto. Veto is just saying, nope, I don't agree with portions or all of this bill. Remember, in this same part of the story is you have to remember the line item veto. That was back in 1996, that it was outlawed because President Clinton was allowed to line through items in the bill. If he didn't like it, back then he was allowed to line through something, initial it, and then the rest of the bill will be approved to go forward. Since then, the Supreme Court deemed that that was unconstitutional. You can't do that. If you're going to veto any portion of the bill, you need to send the whole thing back, not just that portion of it, and then approve it. And so, veto. Also with the regular veto is understanding that 3/4 votes of the Congress can override a presidential veto. All of that information is in that section. So I said there were 4 approvals or veto. The other 2 conditions is does not sign but allows the bill to become law. And the second is pocket veto. So how is it possible that the president does not sign a bill but it still becomes law? It is possible because if the president receives a bill on his desk and the Congress is in session, the president has 10 days to act upon that bill, to sign it. If he does nothing within that 10 days and Congress is in session, that bill would automatically become law. Pocket veto is the opposite of that. A pocket veto is the president receives the bill, but Congress is adjourned. Congress is not in session. So that 10 days does not really apply. It does not become law. It becomes a pocket veto. The president does not veto it. He doesn't touch it, but it still does not become law because Congress is not in session. So make sure you understand those nuances, those differences. Okay, I'm trying to see if there's any way I can. Okay, so somebody, Darlene says, we can hear. Okay, I just saw your comment. I guess my other question is, can you all speak? And will I be able to hear? So for those that are pretty good with live and so forth, I guess my other question is, yes, you can hear me speaking, but is it a way for you to speak back to me? You know, like if you have questions. If not, you could type your questions in the comment, and I will definitely get back to the questions. All right, so in the budget process, again, still talking the story, in the budget cycle process, you got budget formulation, congressional action, and budget execution. Each one of those. So a little bit different than the general bill and proposals is the budget process. Because remember, the budget comes from the president to Congress. Congress goes through it, then it goes back to the president to sign for it to become law. So the process is a little bit different. So what do we need to know from here? All right, we talked about OMB circular A11 is where Office of Management and Budget. Well, okay, who's Office of Management and Budget? Again, as I mentioned, the success on this exam is not just knowing what acronyms stand for, know who people, the key individual, key players, who they are, what they do, why do we care? So as we talked about the legislative branch, they have the Congressional Budget Office. The executive branch has Office of Management and Budget. And we're at the DOD level, we have the Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller. So make sure we get that in line. So OMB issues guidance on the budget. Makes sense because they're in charge of the federal budget. So each of the agencies will submit their budget requests, and OMB will do the fall review. So during the fall review, they'll do the OMB passback, where they'll actually make decisions on what portion of the defense budget, state budget, education budget, what portion they're going to submit for inclusion into the presidential budget. And then the budget OMB passback is their final numbers on what they're going to approve, send forward for the president to sign. And by law, when does the president have to submit the budget request for the upcoming fiscal year? No later, so it doesn't have to be that day, but by law, it's no later than the first Monday in February of that same year for the upcoming fiscal year. Decisions by the president. So congressional action. So once OMB, with the okay of the president, submits the budget up to the Congressional Budget Office, there's some congressional action, things that happen at congressional level. I'm stumbling. Congressional level in what they do with the budget before we get to an appropriation. They have the budget resolution process, authorization process, and the appropriation process. Again, when you're studying, read it like a story. What's happening at the next step? Who done it? So budget resolution process. So when the president submits the budget to Congress, the budget resolution process is the time where the House and the Senate decides on what stipulations, what guidelines they're going to use to go through the presidential budget. What things they're definitely not going to approve, what things they may, why not. All of that is determined in the budget resolution. In the budget resolution process, as I mentioned earlier, Congress has their own budget office, Congressional Budget Office, and the CBO provides the financial data. They provide, okay, what was our deficit for the previous year? What was our outlay? How much money did we spend as a nation? All of that data is provided in the Congressional Budget Resolution process. What you need to understand is which House and which Senate is responsible for the budget resolution process. It's the House Budget Committee and the Senate Budget Committee. Once they make their decision in the budget resolution stage, is okay, this is the guidelines that we need to submit forward and how we're going to look at the budget. The next phase is the authorization process. So remember, the budget resolution process is a concurrent budget resolution. What that means is actions happen in both the House and the Senate, but it does not go to the president for the president to sign, because it doesn't make sense. If we're going to put limitations on the president's budget, we don't want any input from the president on what that limitation should be. So the concurrent budget resolution does not go to the president for signature. In the authorization process is handled by the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee. You need to know which House and which Senate is responsible for that. The number one purpose for the authorization process, make sure you get that, is to authorize the programs. The category of things, let me try to call back in. The category of things that we are allowed to spend the money on. It does not give us budget authority, does not give us funding. So you got to remember, though, on the exam, if you see authorization versus appropriation, is understand that the funding comes with the appropriation process. In order for the authorization process to complete, is it has to go to the president for the president to sign.
Caller to this conference. Please wait while others join.
Okay.
The leader has not activated this time.
Yeah. All right. My bad. All right. So the authorization process ends when it goes to the president for it to be signed to become law. The authorization law. Number one purpose of the authorization law is to authorize the programs, the category of things that we are allowed to do with the appropriation. And then the third congressional action is the appropriation process, what most of us care about, because the purpose of the appropriation process is to give us funding, the budget authority. House Appropriation Committee and Senate Appropriation Committee is responsible for the appropriation process. The appropriation process ends when the president signs and it becomes law. So we get funding. Congress appropriates the funds. So once Congress appropriates the fund, two things happen. The number one thing that happened, which is legally binding, is the Treasury issues a Treasury warrant. So the Treasury is a key player because that's our bank, the nation's bank. And we just said earlier in Article 1, Section 9, that we cannot get any money out of the Treasury unless we have an appropriation law or a temporary appropriation law, which is a continuing resolution. And so once Congress appropriates the money, the Treasury issues a Treasury warrant, which is by essence saying that we have the law, your account set up, you can start billing against it. The second thing that happens is OMB begins the apportionment process. This is another term that most people are not familiar with until they get to the CDFM. So Congress appropriates, OMB apportions. SF 132. So what happens once Congress appropriates the funding, the agencies such as Department of Defense have to submit an SF 132 apportionment document up to OMB to say, okay, Congress appropriated $5 million, please give me my $5 million. SF 132, apportionment. They have 10 days to submit the apportionment to OMB. Then OMB has 30 days to issue their apportionment. Then the next term you have to learn is allotment. DOD and the other agencies issue allotment. The purpose of understanding the terms and who does what is so when you come to the ADA violation and they say, okay, you violated apportionment, well, the only people who can have apportionment is between OMB and the agencies. If you violate an allotment or what you're given, then it's at our level. We get allotments. So I want to make sure that's clear. So in the execution phase is once Congress appropriates the fund, there are about 12 appropriations that are approved within that process. The DOD, Department of Defense, and since this is a DOD exam, you want to know that the DOD is focused on 3 appropriations. They are defense, military construction / Veterans Affairs, and energy and water development. Those are the 3 out of the 12 in the group. There are 3 that are DOD related, and they are defense, military construction, veteran affairs, and energy and water development. All right, so we're still telling the story. So as we talked about stopgap. So why does the government shut down? You know, you could consistently hear that term. The government will shut down. The government will shut down if we do not have an appropriation law in place or a continuing resolution, which is a temporary appropriation law, a stopgap. So you have to also know, well, what are the conditions under a continuing resolution? Okay, no new starts. I can't start any new contracts. I must operate under the same rate of operation as I did in the previous year. I cannot execute anything above and beyond. So those are some of the basic guidelines behind it. So what if Congress, let's say we've spent $5 million and then in the CR, and then when Congress appropriates the fund, they only gave us $4 million. Have we committed an ADA violation? And the answer to that question is no. If you are operating under whatever the rules are at that point, if you're operating under a CR and you're still under the rate of operation, no new start, and you're operating the way you were supposed to, even if Congress later appropriates for a lower amount, you have not committed an ADA violation. So just be careful with that. So as I mentioned, the SF 132 is submitted 10 days after Congress appropriates the funds by the agencies to OMB. OMB has 30 days to issue the apportionment, and then the agencies has to submit an SF 133 quarterly. That's basically an execution plan. This is how much you wanted for that quarter. You said you were going to spend. This is how much you actually spend. Please explain. And at some level, I think we do that at our level also. Every appropriation has a specific purpose, specific time, specific amount that we are allowed to spend those appropriations. So part of that, even though it's in Module 1, that's also part of Module 3.1, which is fiscal law. So if you notice, fiscal law accounts for the majority of the questions on all these exams. Again, if while I'm talking and you have questions, since I can't hear you right now, please go ahead and write your questions in the comment section of this video, and I'll be sure to answer it. So we talked about that. We talked about apportionment. All right. So let's touch on this again. Congress appropriates, OMB apportions. So anytime, anywhere you're reading and you see apportion, this agency apportions funds to this organization apportions funds to the agencies, then you automatically will know OMB apportions funds. DOD issues allotment, since we fall under the DOD. We commit administrative reservation of fund. We set the money aside. I'm going to lunch today. I have $20 in my pocket for lunch. That's administrative reservation. Obligation is legal reservation. Now I have a contract. I order my food. I ate the food. Contract. I got to pay for it. Outlay. The term that we commonly use is disbursement, but in the CDFM, the official term is outlay. Outlay, funds that have actually been moved from the federal treasury. So when the funds are removed out of the treasury to pay a bill, that is called an outlay, not disbursement / disbursement. But I doubt you'll see the word disbursement in the near future. So once Congress appropriates the money, then there's a requirement to have congressional oversight. Who's going to do the checks and make sure that we're following the rules established by Congress? In comes another key player, the Government Accountability Office, GAO, right? Those people that wear the black suits all the time. The GAO is an independent auditing agency that works directly for Congress. They provide the oversight. Again, you can tell people all day long, don't do this. You can do this, but you can't do that. But if nobody's checking and verifying and inspecting, chances are people are not going to adhere to them. So Congress has the GAO to do this function, congressional oversight. The role of the person in charge of the GAO is the CG, Comptroller General. In this study guide, if you see CG, they're not talking about Commanding General. They're talking about Comptroller General. That's the title of the person in charge of the GAO. So when it comes to the budget, let's switch now to the federal budget. Again, I'm just reading the story in the book. Flipping, reading. That's how you need to get to the point when you know that you're ready to take the exam. Can you flip the page, look at the topic, and talk about what's going on in that topic? So the federal budget, the revenue that comes in. We said that Congress can raise revenue, right? So the money that comes in, the majority of the money that comes into the federal government comes from individual income tax, right? So that's why they always say, hey, we're going to have to raise taxes, because what is safe, right? Over 50%, actually, yep, 50% of the money that the government makes comes from individual income tax, and the other large pocket comes from our Social Security and Medicare, right? So we're paying on both sides the taxes, and they take out for Social Security and Medicare. The majority of the funding comes from both areas. So that's what you need to understand from this particular area. Not necessarily the percentages, but understand that the majority comes from individual income tax, Social Security, and then you have the smaller pockets of the corporate income tax and other. All right, let's talk about government spending. kind of like personal spending. You have certain bills that are must funds. No matter what else you do, you have to make those payments. So those are your mandatory bills, mandatory spending, direct spending. If you look at it, you see that 70% of the money that the government comes in has to go back out to pay mandatory bills. And only 30% is left discretionary to do everything else, right? To do your Department of Education, to focus on your defense. And oh, by the way, of that 30%, your DOD gets 15, so get about half of that 30%, so 15.3%. So hence, whenever they're talking about cutting back on costs, they always look at the DOD first, because of that 30% discretionary, you're already getting half. What are you doing on it with it? So that's how you kind of look at the spending breakdown in that particular spending of our country. All right, Grant Rodham. And we talked about again the 96 line item veto, the Chief Financial Officers Act of 1990, right? That says we need to have an auditable financial system. All of those things as you're reviewing the topic. So I'm going to drive on. This is 1217. All right, so the next area, now that we have our budget, we can pay. We look at how we get funding in. We look at what bills we pay out. And then we now look at manpower, right? Resources. You got to have people to do the work. So we got to look at operational chain of command, right? How does the resources flow? Because it's based on priority. So you should know, and I think also it's covered in Module 2, that operational chain of command runs from the President to the SecDef to the combatant commanders. So it's not directly on the page in front of me, but you got to be able to tie the information together. So when it comes to priority of resources, priority of manpower, the priority is going to go to the needs of those combatant commanders. You know, they have different Southcom, Northcom, all of those folks. They don't own the resources, but they own those geographical areas, and if they have a requirement, then the resourcing goes to them. So the first priority for manpower goes to the combatant commanders, and it's based off of guidance on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay, that's another group of people. Who are they? All right. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are military representatives from all of the services. They are the top guys in their field. Your president is a civilian. Your SecDef is a civilian. Your joint staff are military representative. And then they have the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, who advises on all the defense, military related items. So guidance from the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff and the joint staff is given to the SecDef on manpower, on resources. Also, again, my job is to kind of show you how the different modules overlap. Is Module 2 will go more in depth in the Future Year Defense Program, but is discussed in Module 1. The Future Year Defense Program is a DoD database that keeps track of the mission, the resources necessary, and the funding that you need to get the job done. So all of those three things it looks at. The Future Year Defense Program. So you keep track of all of that. When it comes to activation of forces, the president has certain authority. Presidential authority to activate reserve forces. What are they? Well, he can only activate forces if it has something to do with threatened terrorist attack, or it has something to do with weapons of mass destruction. The president can activate forces for up to a year, 365 days, and no longer than that. The total amount that he can activate is no more than 200,000 members of the selected reserve, and the individual IRR ready reserve may be activated. And of that 200,000, no more than 30,000 can come out of the IRR. So those are the stipulations on the president's ability to activate forces. All right, I'm going to pause, drink some water. Any questions in the comment? Okay. Nope, I don't see any questions. All right, we'll drive on. All right, let's see. So separation incentive, you got the buyout program or the separation incentive program. Early retirement. You can do early retirement or they can buy you out. And then they have restrictions there. So it's permitted no more than 25,000 buyout separations a year. And in the buyout payments, the lesser of 40,000. So that means it's capped at 40,000 as far as a severance pay. If we're going to buy you out, we're going to pay you to retire, we're going to pay you to get out. That means the most we're going to pay is 40,000. OMB, Office of Management and Budget. We talked about OMB Circular A11, where it talks about budget process. And then you have OMB Circular A76. The A76 deals with commercial activity. That's when you're trying to determine whether we keep the job in-house by the government or we get a contractor or a vendor to do that particular job, or keep it inherently governmental or put it over to commercial. A perfect example of an A76 is government housing on post. It used to be handled all by inherently governmental, all by the government. And then a few years ago, it went to a commercial company that's actually running the housing on these installations. So A76 is a decision that's made whether to do a study to keep things in-house or to get a contractor. All right, so some terms you have to be familiar with when it comes to commercial activity. We talked about inherently governmental. Most of you should already know the performance work statement. But another term that's introduced in the CDFM is the most efficient organization. So you have a contractor, they put their bid in, and then you have the government who also has to do a work study to determine, and if you've been around for a while, you've probably participated in this, where they come around and someone from the probably force management comes around and they ask, what do you do? List your tasks, everything that you do. How long does it take you to do it? How many emails, how many phone calls, to try to actually get a cost associated with what we do. That government structure is called the most efficient organization, the MEO. So when you look at they're trying to do a cost study. You have to develop a performance work statement. You get a study, so when it actually is going to affect the civilian workforce, and I think it says over 46 or more, when you affect the positions of over 46 or more personnel, then you have to notify Congress that you're going to do a work study. So when the study is done, the MEO is developed. That's your government structure to get a cost associated with the job. And then you do the performance work statement to explain what needs to be done to accomplish this job. Then you send that performance work statement to solicit bids, and then you go through the MEO to complete that independent cost estimate. We want to get a price on it. So at the end, you do a cost comparison, how much it costs the government to do their job and how much it costs a contractor. There must be a 10% difference or a lower price of the contractor for it to be considered as an option. Understanding that there are always exception to the policy, and that exception may be, okay, for instance, the biggest one is on most military installation. For those who've been around the military, it used to only be military personnel, only be those soldiers. And then once the war in the early 1990s kicked off, then those soldiers have to be pulled to deploy. So then it went to first contractors to be on the gate, and then I think eventually it transitioned to some government employees. But a cost comparison is traditionally done, but again, if mission dictates that we don't have time to sit here and to wait 12 months to do an actual study and so forth, is that mission has to occur, and then they go ahead and do the swap. So the big thing here with the A76 is understanding at the point where Congress has to be notified, and Congress is notified if that study is going to involve 46 or more DoD civilian positions. So 46 positions. I'm just writing that down. All right, let's talk about ethics. Again, some fiscal law included in your Module 1. Can I accept a gift from a contractor? Well, ethically, yes. However, the value of the gift cannot exceed $20. If I got a pen from a contractor, the value of this pen cannot exceed $20. And annually in that year, I cannot exceed more than $50 worth of gift from that same contractor. So $20, $50. The other thing you need to know when it comes to gifts is the limit on the gifts to a superior. If, let's say, your boss is leaving and they start coming around and collecting funds, collecting money, do you want to donate? You're limited to donating no more than $10 per person. So those are the big ones that stick out. Honoraria. What is that? Honoraria is, let's say you graduated from the University of North Carolina and the school invited you to come to speak. You're a budget analyst. You graduated. Now you're a budget analyst. You work for the United States Army and they want you to come and speak to their class. If you are operating under your official capacity, you cannot accept funding. You cannot accept money from that college. Honoraria is saying, we want to pay you to come and speak. The only way you can accept that honoraria, let's say they invite you to come and speak to the graduating class because you are an alumni of that university. Yes, you can accept money because you are an alumni. Got nothing to do with your job in your official capacity. And in most of these ethical cases, the best thing to do, again, is to get with your ethical lawyers, to get something in writing, explain to them what it is that you're being offered. Just like I always have contractors that ask, hey, can we pay you to come to our organization to teach a CDFM? Well, no, I cannot, because I work for the government, you work for the government. I cannot have you pay me in that official capacity. So those are just some instances. Can I supplement my salary? That's what it is. If I accept money from another organization that works with my organization, I'm getting paid for my organization and you pay me. No, you cannot supplement your salary in that case. So just be careful again with the fiscal law portion of it. Is if you're not sure, is use your lawyers to find out what is the right decision. So we talked about, let's switching gears, and the reason I'm doing it like this is I'm switching right away because again on the exam the questions will not be in any order. So don't go thinking you're going to go from resource management to manpower management to, no, it's not going to go like that. It's going to be just random scenarios, random questions. And so only if you know what right looks like will you be able to determine, okay, what are they talking about? So when we talk about risk management and internal control, understand that every decision, everything that we do, there's a risk associated with that decision. And so enterprise risk management is just making sure that you're considering the risk. When you're doing your internal control measures, you're putting that in place, consider the risk. So in that section, you will also be introduced to OMB Circular A123. So we've talked about OMB Circular A11 that deals with budget. We've talked about OMB Circular A76 that deals with commercial activity, which is vendors. And now we've been introduced to OMB Circular A123, which deals with internal control. It is making sure, again, that we have internal control measures in place so that we can report at the end of the year that we have reasonable assurance that everything is done the way it's supposed to, especially when you deal with government funds, is we have to be able to explain and justify what measures, processes we have in place, because again, if we lose any portion of this money, is we're responsible for paying out of our pocket, and we don't like to do that. So we got to make sure everything's in place. So when it comes to internal control, we get the guidance from OMB A123. You also get guidance from GAO. And when we talk about GAO, you're going to learn three, you should by now know the three policies or guidance that we get from the GAO. And if you think about a stoplight is red, yellow, green. GAO red book deals with appropriation. The GAO yellow book deals with auditing, and the GAO green book deals with internal control. Appropriation, auditing, internal control. Red, yellow, green. So those are the three guidance that they talk about in this CDFM that you actually are going to have to know. DOD also issues guidance on internal control. It is covered in DOD instruction 5010 5010.40. If you see that again, it'll probably be this DOD regulation governs internal control. They might have DODI 5010.20, DODI 5010.30, 5010.40, 5010.50, and you got to pick the right one. The only one you really focus on in the CDFM is 5010.40. So it behooves you to make sure you know that it deals with internal control. DODI 5010.40. So the Federal Managers Financial Integrity Act of 1982 says we are to prevent waste and misuse of those limited resources that we get, because we want to assure that we also have accountability of the assets that been granted for us to take care of. And so part of that is that internal control, right? So as you're studying, making sure that you're reviewing the laws that's applicable to that subject. So the FMFIR IA 1982 Federal Managers Financial Integrity Act that says we have to have internal control measures in place. And when they talk about risk management, it's in here, it's no different than the risk management that you might do for another event. Is you have to first understand the context of what it is that you're trying to do. When you do it, identify the risk, then you develop mitigating factors to reduce the risk so it doesn't cost any particular major event. And so when it comes to the risk ERM, they talk about the risk profile. There's a difference between a risk profile and the risk register. So the risk register is just a list of all the risks associated with that mission. Your profile is where you identify the major risks. The primary purpose is to provide thoughtful analysis. So you identify the risk, you talk about what it takes to mitigate that risk, and is it a high risk, low risk, medium? When you apply the fix, does it reduce the risk? So all of those things are covered there. And so the GAO is where you will go to GAO Green Book to get additional guidance on internal control. And so at the end of the year, you have to submit a statement, right? Internal control statement. The DOD has to submit it, where they talk about material weakness. And do we have areas? A statement of assurance is what most of us are familiar with. And there's a packet that is submitted to say what all the things that we have to deal with, what we have done to mitigate those things, and do we have assurance? So you have three options. Unmodified statement of assurance, meaning we have no material weakness. A modified statement of assurance, we have maybe one or two, we have a few. Or no statement of assurance. Statement of no assurance, meaning that we have few to no controls in place. No matter what we do, we cannot alleviate the risk. And so that's all part of the statement of assurance. All right, see all that? I've done all module 1. Let me go to fiscal law. And then we'll continue next week with the part 2 of the study guide, and where I'll be pulling from different directions. But I want this first one to be kind of just reading the story, going through the study guide, looking at the topic, and because you're never going to feel 100%. I know everything in this book, back to front, front to back, up, down. And so now I can go take the exam. The only way you will know that you're ready to take these modules or these exams is, can you look at the topic and articulate everything you know about that topic? So that likewise, when you see it again on the exam, it's like keywords. You're going to see keywords. There's certain words you have to know, or you have to see to know what they're talking about. And when you see those keywords, when you see Article 2, do you automatically know it's talking about the executive branch or the president? When you hear apportionment, do you already know, okay, they're talking about between OMB and the agencies or DOD? So those are the kind of things that you have to look at. Can you take a blank sheet of paper and start putting this puzzle back together? If back in the day they used to do the game, the scramble, when you scramble different words, and these are just different techniques that I'm trying to give you, is if you use like yellow sticky notes or cards like this, different colors, and you can write like the key player names on them. And what I used to do when I first started is this studying is I wrote all the keywords down, put them all in one area, and then I test myself by taking from one end and then put them where they go. Started off with the 3 branches of government. Then I put the sticky, okay, GAO falls under Congress. CBO, Congressional Budget Office, falls under Congress. OMB, President, Executive Branch. USD Comptroller falls under DOD. And the word allotment, apportionment, appropriation falls under, and kind of doing it like that. That's how you test yourself. So it's going back old school way, where you actually put some diagrams in front of you to be able, because again, then you can visualize it when you're taking a test. No paper, no pen, no calculator, no phone, just you and that computer. And you got to be able to recall the information. And so it's best if you can get it all sorted out in your head where things belong to, then it makes it easier for you to do. All right, so I think I'm going to end here for today because I've already covered a lot. And then next week I'm going to go tie the fiscal law from module 3 a little bit more into this, and then I'm going to go over some other study questions. But you should be able to go through this study guide several times if you're studying for module 1, because again, the information overlaps between 1, 2, and 3, and so you don't want to just focus on module 1. And the purpose for me being here is I've gone through all of it, and now I'm able to tie in what's happening in module 2, module 3 to where we are now as we close up with module 1. All right, so I see no questions at the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and end this live at this point. This is part 1, and next week I'm going to do the part 2 completion of review of CDFM module 1 out of the 2020 study guide. So thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll see you guys again next time.